Well, hello folks. Doing my morning walkthrough. Figured I would do like a fall garden update. Tell you kind of what's coming, what I plan on doing. Kind of do it like a channel update. And while I'm here, show you one of the 3 invasives that give me trouble and really hinder what I can do here. I've already mentioned privet being one of the invasives. And I've made a few mentions about Bermuda grass. I will do a video eventually on what I do to control the Bermuda grass. But for now, I'm going to show you this guy. Yeah, come on now, focus. Let me see if I set it down here. This is a milk snail. Okay. As a kid, we just called them garden snails. This one's not especially large, but they get much bigger than this. Mixed in with this guy, you can see these little spiral shelled snails. They're another invasive, but they actually prey upon the milk snail. And the milk snail is a garden pest. It attacks seedlings. So in a permaculture, well, I'm going to go ahead and put this log jam back. So where are you going to find these? Underneath logs, underneath rocks, near anywhere that there's some sprouts. That's where you're going to find them. I've gardened and farmed in multiple locations, and this location is unique in that it is just lousy with those milk snails. So I've mentioned critical mass when doing annuals. If you're trying to get self-seeding annuals and you try to plant like one plant out and then you let it self-seed, if you have a situation going on like I do with these snails, that one plant is not going to make enough seed to survive the onslaught of predators that will come when it starts to sprout. So you have to get the population of annuals to a critical mass where they produce so many seeds that even when the predators that are around go after them, some of those seedlings survive long enough that they are no longer palatable and they can grow to maturity and seed again. So I've only been able to achieve that with a few crops, and there are some crops I showed in my updates that well, I didn't show in the updates, that actually did self-seed for a few seasons and then stopped for whatever reason. The milk snail population we have here is largely getting under control. And that's largely just managing the wood piles and where we locate them. But also Roadrunner. Mr. Roadrunner likes to come and fish them out of my wood piles and bang them on the rocks and eat them. So he helps me keep them under control. But a little special note, if you end up with these milk snails, it's not entirely a terrible situation because they're edible. They're invasive, but they were brought in on purpose to create a market for escargot. So if you have them, then you have a protein source if you're into eating snails. I'm just taking a walk into the unmanaged property, I should call it. It's managed in that I remove invasives, but I don't plant anything. I let nature have its course. I think if you're going to have any type of farm, you should set aside some space where you just let nature, have its way. At least 10% of your property. This is what I've got here is a mesquite tree. Edible beans. There are edibles on this, just because I don't purposely grow anything. But what I'm up here today for, so I've got to gather seeds from this guy. Place down my tools here. This is a sumac. And the exact species escapes me, but the genus is, I believe it's pronounced Rhus, R-H-U-S. This one has a few seeds. Right there. Come on, give me a focus. Come on, will you? All right. And this one has a lot more seeds. I fear I may have lost them in the drought. I want to collect these seeds and sprout them by hand in little pots and transplant them to better locations. If you look, I'm up on a hill. So right down here, this is integral to my water plan. Water percolates out from the bottom here. It takes a long time for water to seep through, and we've had the water tested. It's completely clean water. So this is like a water battery. For a very long time after a rain, water will still come out of here and flow down along this edge. And I do have plans to cultivate this hillside with terraces. Just, again, one of those projects I haven't gotten around to. But meanwhile, what's growing on here is native grasses, and this shrub, this sumac. The berries, I've known for a long time they were used by Native Americans in the area to make a red dye. And I had read that in some places that they were edible, or at least in that they were used to make a tea, like a sun tea. But I hadn't read anywhere that they are, you can just start just popping these berries in your mouth and just eating them. I have read some places that claim you can eat the berries, but they don't say if you can just sit and eat a big giant bowl of the berries. And I don't know that I would trust those sources, but from what I have seen, I have not personally eaten this plant. I don't know that I would advise anybody to, but it is useful and wildlife does love it. So I mentioned some challenges finding a shrub layer plant that produces edible crops in abundance for human edibility. But you know, this could be a shrub to fill that void. It grows with absolutely no care. This is growing through the drought on the side of a hill, on a northwest facing hill, and the slant on this, it goes from about well, this rock wall here is 8 foot from the bottom to the top, and it makes that drop in about probably 2 or 3 feet of length. So that's quite a slope. And so I have this growing on the slope, and even though I feared this one may have died, it may come back. These native species, when it gets really hot, they look like they dry up, but then the following year they'll green back right up. So I have 2 or 3 of these growing on the hill, and every year I've been taking the seeds, taking about 25% of them and spreading on the property, and haven't had any come up anywhere else yet. But we'll soon, that's a project I'm going to work on. But back to my critical mass annuals rant. I'm just looking around. So yeah, so I've got a seed bank, probably about 300 different types of seeds of all different kinds of crops. And any given year, I normally grow way more annuals than you've seen in my update videos. But that's because I was experimenting with how they grow. And now I've got a short list of crops to start testing out whether or not they will self-seed and self-propagate. So that'll be coming. In the fall, I don't plan on doing anything with annuals. I have quite a bit of home DIY to do. Everything from painting my house to fence repair to shed repair. I got to rebuild a compost heap. Things like that. Digging in my pond. You can see this in the summertime. I had a video of this in the snow. You can get a good look of it's all greened up. I have some garden beds I'll probably assemble during the winter, but probably won't be growing a lot of annuals or a lot of crops. I'll be doing a lot of tree trimming. I'll probably bring you along for one or two of those little adventures, trimming the trees. That's the good thing about doing something like this. You build out your garden beds, you set it all up, you put in your perennials. And that's where I put all my energy in on this so far, is putting in the perennials. They take the longest to get established and started and to get crop yield from. When it comes to the annuals, just about any time you want to get into the annual growing game, you're about a season away. You spend some money for seed, as long as you've got the growing space, you know, one season and you can have a crop. Whereas if you want to do trees, you know, it can take you 5 years before you start getting to maximum productivity. maybe even 10 years for some trees. So when I started doing this, I really focused most of my energy on the perennials and the upper canopy and shrub and vine layers, because I had done a lot of growing years previous, traditional type growing with domestic crops. So my root crops and my herbaceous domestic crops, at least, I knew for the most part what I wanted to grow, but it's time consuming to get started, because you have to build that first stand of annuals, that large little grouping of seeding plants, so they can produce enough seed to self-seed. A lot of times that involves sprouting them. With the milk snail situation, if I sprout in the field, I'll lose a lot more crop than if I sprout indoors in pots and then transplant out. Eventually, when I get a stand of annuals going that's big enough, maybe, you know, it'll self-seed and produce so much seed that I won't have to worry about that. But for now, to get that first stand started, to get to critical mass, I have to do that. So, and I plan on maybe this winter, like I said, I'm digging the pond. Maybe I'll have some time to put more energy. I really need to put energy into, you know, take a step back from growing crops, because I've got most of the perennials and the crops that take forever to grow. I've got them started, and start putting it into infrastructure, because the biggest thing that I need to do is start capturing water. If you're going to do what I'm trying to do, grow the way I'm trying to grow, which you know you don't really have to if you want to make a profit, but if you're trying to be to reduce your inputs to where you don't have to go elsewhere to grow your crops, then yeah, water is, at least where I'm at, is the number one place you need to be looking to improve. Capture as much water as you can. We easily get all the water I need to water every crop I need for the whole year. We could probably get that in one decent rainfall, but I can't capture it all and save it and relocate it yet. So put some energy into there. So that's probably won't do a whole lot with annuals until the spring. And in the spring, I have some things slotted up. Amaranth, I'd like to grow. There are some wild varieties of tobacco that I've been looking into that I want to check out. I've got, let's see, when I go into the mountains, there's a crop of miner's lettuce that I have that is really tasty, and I've got seeds for. And I've got some other natives that I've got seed for, prairie turnip, some others that are all in that herbaceous layer that I'm still working to develop, that I'm going to grow in the spring, but won't be doing much of that in the fall. Like I said, it'll be mostly tree trimming, bed creation, water capture, composting, but I will do some videos on the some of those updates. And then I do have dormant crops that come up. I'll do updates on that. So let's see. And I think last but not least, I'll just rant a little bit about self-sufficiency. Like, why have that as a goal? If you're trying to do a farm, you're trying to make money, there's absolutely no need to do, like from a self-sufficient perspective. You can spend all the money you need to bring in dirt, to bring in your fertilizer, pay for all the supplemental water you need, buy pots for potting things up and selling them, and packaging material, and then after you sell it, you'll still make a profit. It'll still work just fine. But if something happens and you have a disruption in your soil supply, then your business is interrupted, which is not a huge risk. You can manage that risk, sure. But where I'm located, soil supply is a problem. It's not easy to find a good supply of soil, so I have to make a lot of my own soil. Water. We were on water restriction this year, and fortunately I built my whole garden to have crops that are native or naturalized into areas that doesn't need very much water. They're extremely drought tolerant. So I didn't have to do a lot of supplemental water. But if I was growing a lot of, say, elderberry, if I had an elderberry orchard, I would have been toast. I wouldn't have been allowed. I probably would have had my water shut off. Wouldn't have been allowed to water all that I would have had to do. Now, could I have spent more time amending the soil? Sure. But then you're back to, you have to spend money. You have to bring in soil if you want to do it quickly. So the method I'm doing is to work with what I have, build up the soil that I have. There's nothing wrong with doing it the other way. But if you're going to do it my way, then you do have to look into generating a lot of your inputs yourself. And one thing you have to understand is that it's nice to have it as a goal that you generate every input that you need to your garden all on your property. But understand that it's probably not a realistic goal. You're probably going to have to bring in something. But having that goal, though, is likely going to ensure that you're going to get as close as possible to achieving it, to reduce the amount of inputs that you need, to ensure that you can grow and farm despite what the supply side of your business is doing to you. You can at least grow in some capacity, maybe a reduced capacity. Maybe you can't deliver 2,000 plants a year to the general public, but maybe you can deliver 500 with your own resources that you can generate. So why is that important to me? I really can't say. A lot of this started just trying to I had interruptions in my water supply from the water company, interruptions in my food supply, and just wanting to have a little bit more self-sufficiency, to get some of these greens and some of this food. You can't even get it in the store, let alone organic, and to produce it cheaper than I can buy it. So that's another thing to consider, is if you're producing this and you're buying all your soil and you're paying for all your water, and you're getting a carrot out of the ground, per carrot, are you paying less than you would be in the store? And if not, you really got to question whether or not, you really, what's the value of what you're doing. Now, if it's just a hobby and you're getting enjoyment out of it, then okay, great, then it's worth it. But if you're wanting to do, that's the difference between a garden and a farm, is a farm's going to make profit. So if that is your goal, then it is probably, worth looking into, to generate. And I've never seen a farm that doesn't do this, that tries to make use of every single resource at their disposal that they can. You see a lot of gardening channels will say, find a local landscaper and get them to deliver wood chips to your house. They're just dying to do it because they because they need a place to dump it and store it, and you're giving them a free place to do it. Well, in my area, that doesn't work. So a lot of why I'm doing what I'm doing is out of necessity. A lot of the advice, a lot of the supply that you would need to run something like this isn't available where I'm at, or it is available, but it's super expensive to get it out here. So yeah, the people in my area are completely hip. All the landscapers are completely hip to the wood chip situation, and you're not going to get them for free. You're going to have to buy them. So that's why I go to the county brush, the municipal brush dump to get the chipped wood. I can take a load of wood chips in, or not wood, but brush from my home in, and come back out with chipped up wood, and without having to buy a wood chipper. So, making use of those free resources. There's a channel that I watched when I was trying to do this that really influenced me, called OYR Frugal, and that's kind of the philosophy that guy does, is, how can you do this for free or cheap? He's got an interesting way to do high tunnels in zone 5 that without needing a heated greenhouse. So when I was doing mine, that was very appealing to me. Plus, having a heated greenhouse isn't all that it's cracked up to be where I'm at. When we had Snowmageddon, we had rolling blackouts. So I had built a grow tent, and I had it heated, and it was lit up and everything on a timer. It was all set up. And I had some cold tolerant avocados. They were cold tolerant down to about 15 degrees Fahrenheit. But we were getting 0 degrees Fahrenheit during that time. And even though I had a heated grow tent, when we had rolling blackouts, there was no heat and no electricity. And then it got too cold, and that's how I lost my avocados. So looking into passive systems that don't rely on electricity, more of a pre-industrial, pre-electrical time frame type growing methods is what is going to appeal to me, and what I generally employ here for those types of reasons, because it's not really reliable. relying on outside resources for inputs, at least not where I'm at. So yeah, laws of thermodynamics, you're probably not going to be able to grow all your inputs, especially if you're going to go into business. If you're just trying to grow for your family, and especially if you do human manure composting, you could probably achieve that, like a zero sum. But if you're going to sell, 5,000 plants a year or something like that, now you're producing extra. It's unlikely you're going to be able to bring in that many inputs to offset the loss of fertility in your land. It's doubtful you're going to be able to bring that many inputs in for free. But that's okay. If you're doing that big of a business, then you're probably making enough profit to cover it. So, I'm a small timer, and so I don't have that much money. Look at this. Look at all that Japanese privet just growing all up in there. And then you pan over, even in the summer with everything greened up, it's still much nicer. But that stuff is just coming for me. There's nothing I can do. I can only stave it off for a little while. But yeah, if you're doing that kind of business, but even if I could produce that much, I don't have the means to get that much material out to the customer. I can only serve whoever is locally around, could ever drive over to me, and I can only serve a small amount once per year, a small inventory. So with my own resources, and I don't know that I want to do any more than that, because that's another, when you're going from garden to farm, like, do you want to do this as a job? It sometimes isn't fun sitting there for 10 hours just potting things up over and over and over all day long. May not be something that brings you enjoyment. It's one thing when you're doing it as a garden for your own purposes. It's another thing when you're doing it as you have to get it done under a time crunch because you have to get it delivered to customers. So that's the same situation when you're growing food. You've seen that I don't use I may not use insecticide, so you'll see some damage on my leaves. But customers don't want to see that. So you take it to a totally different level. Do you want to go that far? Do you want to get into that type of business if you are going to grow? So what I'm really building here is not anything more than capacity. It's just the ability to do any of the things I described, to start up enough of a growing operation to cover the food that I need in a dire situation, or to expand that and be able to actually turn it into a revenue generator. Once you build the garden beds and you build the soil and you have your species in that take a long time to establish, your long growing trees and shrubs, perennials, those kinds of things, now you've got the capacity, and you can expand and you can contract at will, which is what I'm doing this fall. Because if I spent all my time doing perennials, if I started getting a whole bunch of self-seeding annuals established, and now I've got to juggle making sure the perennials get taken care of along with the self-seeding annuals, and if I have a whole bunch of potted plants that I started up to sell, well, now I've got that much extra workload to take care of, and that takes time away from, because I am single-threaded. So just doing my morning walk through and ranting a little bit about some of the things to think about, some of the things I have thought about when doing this, what I might do next with it. Just kind of a walk and talk. So hopefully it's not too boring for you. And if you're a gardener or farmer and you're going through something like this, you're doing this type of work, maybe you've had similar thoughts and maybe you've got some solutions. All right, y'all have a good one.